Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are unpacking an ancient text that asks a profoundly modern question. Is your true worth defined by your background, your looks, or your actual character? We're going to break down an absolutely incredible dialogue from early Buddhist scriptures that tackles social anxiety, the total fear of losing status, and what actually makes a person valuable.
We're looking at a pretty fascinating showdown from the ancient text known as DN4, the Soṇadaṇḍa Sutta. Over the course of this explainer, we'll watch an esteemed, incredibly wealthy religious figure wrestle with this exact question about human worth. And the kicker? He's doing it while battling severe, crippling social anxiety. It's honestly a brilliant psychological case study, wrapped right up in a philosophical debate.
All right, let's set the stage. On one side, you've got our main guy, Soṇadaṇḍa. He's a wealthy, powerful Brahmin, essentially representing the absolute pinnacle of the religious and social establishment. I mean, he lives on a royal estate, he's got hundreds of students, and on the other side is Samana Gautama, the Buddha, a highly respected spiritual guide who has just arrived in town. Naturally, all the locals are rushing out to see the Buddha, which puts this immense, heavy pressure on Soṇadaṇḍa to go and greet him just to maintain his own status.
Which brings us to Section 1, the imposter syndrome. So despite having an impeccable pedigree stretching back 7 generations, 300 loyal students, and total royal favor, Soṇadaṇḍa faces this paralyzing fear as he approaches the Buddhist camp. What's wild is just how modern his anxiety sounds. He is literally terrified of being canceled in public. He's panicking over the thought that if he asks a foolish question or even just answers one poorly, the entire crowd will mock him. And if his reputation drops, well, his income drops, because his entire livelihood depends on his social standing. It's such a profound look at the fragility of status.
Moving right along to Section 2, stripping away the superficial.
The Buddha, being who he is, completely senses Soṇadaṇḍa's intense anxiety over looking bad in front of his peers, so he compassionately throws him a lifeline. He asks Soṇadaṇḍa a question in his wheelhouse. What makes someone a true Brahmin, a truly worthy person? Relieved, Soṇadaṇḍa eagerly lists out 5 requirements: good birth, extensive religious knowledge, good looks, virtue, and wisdom. But the Buddha isn't just making small talk here. He immediately challenges that list. He asks, can we systematically strip away any of these traits without losing the core identity of a good person? Like, could we drop the looks? What about the knowledge? Or even the noble birth?
To answer this, Soṇadaṇḍa actually uses his own nephew, a young man named Angaka, as an example. He points out to the crowd that, hey, his nephew is incredibly handsome, flawlessly educated, comes from a perfect family. But Soṇadaṇḍa admits, if this young man were to become a criminal, if he were to kill, steal, lie, what would his good looks actually do for him? What would his noble birth matter? The answer is absolutely nothing.
So the crucial takeaway here is that by systematically dropping all those superficial traits, the looks, the status, the formal education, both men arrive at a universal agreement. Only 2 qualities remain that truly define human worth: virtue and wisdom. Everything else, it's just window dressing.
That brings us to Section 3, hand-washing hand. Now you might be wondering, how do these 2 remaining pillars actually work together? Well, the text gives us this brilliantly simple metaphor. Think about it. Just as one hand washes the other hand, or one foot washes the other foot, virtue and wisdom are completely inseparable. They purify each other. You simply cannot have true wisdom without moral uprightness, and you definitely cannot have genuine uprightness without the wisdom to guide it.
Let's dive into Section 4, the path of purification. This roadmap gives us a really detailed explanation of what virtue and wisdom actually look like in practice. Step 1 is virtue, or moral discipline. Now, the source text contains this massive, fascinatingly specific list of rules that monks have to follow. But instead of getting bogged down in all those details, we can look at this table summarizing the core of it, completely avoiding harm and violence, abstaining from frivolous distractions like ancient board games and acrobatics, and absolutely refusing to engage in deceptive practices or fraudulent arts, things like fortune-telling and magic spells for money.
Now, why be so strict, right? The text emphasizes that living with this intense moral code isn't just about blindly following rules to please some higher power. It actually frees a person from internal anxiety and external danger. By living purely, you create a blameless happiness within yourself. You don't have to look over your shoulder, and you certainly don't have to fear being canceled like Soṇadaṇḍa, because your foundation is completely unshakable.
Building on that incredibly secure foundation of virtue, the practitioner then has to actively guard their senses. This means not grasping at the things you see, hear, or taste in a way that causes greed or grief.
It requires remaining totally mindful and content in every single action, whether you're walking, eating, or just sitting in silence. You become completely self-contained. The text actually compares it to a bird flying with only the weight of its own wings.
Once that foundation of virtue is perfectly set in stone, the text outlines the actual progression of wisdom. It moves sequentially through 4 clear steps, starting with that morality we just discussed, moving on to actively overcoming negative mental states, called hindrances, then achieving profound states of deep concentration, known as the jhanas, and finally culminating in ultimate insight. To master the mind, you first have to conquer the 5 hindrances. The text uses these incredibly powerful similes to show exactly what it feels like to overcome them. Freeing yourself from covetousness is like finally paying off a massive, crushing debt. Letting go of ill will is like recovering from a terrible sickness. Overcoming restlessness is like being released from prison. Banishing dullness is like being freed from slavery. And clearing your doubt? That's like surviving a dangerous desert road and finally reaching a safe village. It is a profound, literal sigh of relief.
With those hindrances completely gone, the mind enters deep concentration, which is divided into 4 distinct stages, or jhanas. The text beautifully compares these stages of meditation to being completely saturated by cool, refreshing water from a natural spring, or being enveloped entirely in a pure, clean white cloth. There is literally no part of the body or mind left untouched by this deep, joyful tranquility.
Reaching the peak of this concentrated wisdom unlocks some pretty extraordinary insights. The text describes a mind so pure, it unlocks these supernormal abilities. Everything from creating a mind-made body to hearing divine sounds, reading the minds of others, recollecting hundreds of thousands of past lives, and seeing the karmic fate of all beings. But the ultimate goal, the true absolute peak of wisdom, is that final point, the destruction of all spiritual ignorance, completely liberating the mind from suffering once and for all.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, Saving Face.
After this breathtaking cosmic breakdown of the path to ultimate liberation, the narrative brings us crashing right back down to earth and to our deeply relatable human flaws. Overwhelmed and deeply moved by the Buddha's profound teaching, Soṇadaṇḍa fully accepts the Buddha as his guide. He invites him to a meal, completely recognizing the truth of everything that was just said about virtue over status. But his old social anxieties about his public reputation immediately creep right back in.
In a surprisingly funny and brutally honest twist, he pulls the Buddha aside and basically begs for a compromise. He says, look, if I'm with my peers and I just stretch out my hands, can we pretend I stood up? And if I take off my turban, can we just pretend I bowed? He desperately wants a discreet hand wave or a head nod in public instead of a full bow. Desperately trying to practice his new spiritual path without losing his highly lucrative job and social status.
And how does the fully enlightened Buddha respond to this blatant face-saving hypocrisy? The text simply says, the Buddha accepts the compromise in silence. He doesn't lecture him. He doesn't publicly humiliate him. It is a wonderfully compassionate, quiet, and deeply human note to end this philosophical journey on. The Buddha recognizes exactly where Soṇadaṇḍa is at and just lets him save face.
So, as we wrap up this explainer on DN4, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. We might sit back and judge Soṇadaṇḍa for clinging to his status, but how often do you catch yourself doing the exact same thing? How often do you negotiate your own core values or hide your true beliefs just to keep up appearances and protect your reputation in front of your peers? It's a heavy question, for sure, but one definitely worth asking yourself today. Thanks for joining me.